Dani Antman. So she's the author of Wired for God: Adventures of a Jewish Yogini. Dani knows quite a bit about Kundalini. She's a non-dual energy healer and a spiritual guide. And Dani, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that lovely meditation, Sarah.
Oh,
It's really beautiful. Um, I thought I'd just share a little bit of my personal story to give you context, and then we'll get into talking about Kundalini. Um, I wrote the book because my journey is really unusual, and everybody's journey is unusual. Everybody awakens very differently, and spirituality is inherent in every single human being. But we do it differently according to culture, predilections from past life, predilections from how you grew up, and the yearning of your soul. And my journey combined, um, let's say, some ancient connection to the Jewish lineage that was also very troublesome for me and had a lot of karmic pain in it. And the desire to help people in capacities and gifts to be a healer. And they coincided in healing school back in 1988, where I was very drawn for no apparent reason to start studying healing and the subtle body and the chakra system at the Barbara Brennan School of Healing. And I learned about all the chakras and the subtle body. I learned how to work with people psycho spiritually, but it wasn't really a spiritual path. And but it opened me up and it started to heal my own suffering, my own pain, my own wounds. And it was followed by, I followed a teacher from that school who was Jewish into a training, another 4-year training in the Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah. And that's completely different from the Vedic tradition, but there's so many parallels. But it really spoke to the Jewish part of my soul because I was learning about the mystics and the mystical tradition that nobody teaches you in the religion. Again, hidden knowledge. And every tradition has this hidden knowledge and uses different words and different language and different exercises to help people spiritually mature and awaken. After 9 years in that training, I was trained to be a teacher in the training. I found myself at a real turning point because the practices I was doing were no longer helping me. And it was as if I had a burning desire to progress and to awaken and to find oneness, God, whatever you want to call it. And it wasn't being met the way it was initially when I started that training. And there was literally a night when I prayed. I prayed and cried and prayed for help. And I tell that to you because those kind of prayers, when they come so deeply from the heart, are answered. I don't know the distance, but mine were answered in 2 weeks. Some people, they're not answered as quickly. But 2 weeks later, I got an invitation. I was in New York City at that time to meet an Indian Swami who had a lineage, a 600-year-old lineage of Kundalini science. I did not know what Kundalini was. I didn't think I had any kind of process. But in the course of the 3-day weekend, I discovered that indeed I had a very stuck process related to my Jewish lineage. And also, it was called a deflected rising of Kundalini. And I'll go back to that later. But suffice it to say, this one person who I met seemingly by accident had the esoteric knowledge to help me. And I embarked on I guess it was 14 years of direct contact with him over like twice a year. Like I would go on two-week retreats for twice a year where I got specific practices for me, not group practices, not Kundalini yoga the way it's known in the West through Yogi Bhajan, and there's a lot about that. I was getting very specific guidance from him until he died in 2016. And the services were called Patanjali Kundalini Yoga Care. And his main disciple, Joan Harrigan, wrote a book describing the science of their lineage, but not giving practices. And the reason for that was because practices were individual. There were never any group practices because everybody was different and you had to be evaluated very carefully and watched. So it's very different from what's commercially available right now in the spiritual circles. And I was pretty much complete after 14 years of practice. It's a long time. And that knowledge, if any of you want to look at Joan's book, it's called Kundalini Vidya by Joan Harrigan. It's on Amazon.
I'll put it in the
And
chat.
yeah, and my book is my personal experiences, but everybody's are different. But they have been able to help people whose experiences are similar to mine, and there have been quite a few that have contacted me over the years. But again, everybody's different. Native Americans have their own way of working with a tree of life. Peruvian shamans have their own way of awakening people. Celtic people, Roman Catholic people, all the religious practices were initially structured to awaken people, awaken the Kundalini, which I'll just say is the inner force of awakening that works through your subtle body. Everybody has a subtle body, everybody has chakras, and again, they're named different things in different traditions. And this inner force is not energy. People mistake it for energy because energy moves when it's awakening. It's actually, you could say, the subtle light of the divine within you, and you incarnate with it. You incarnate because of it. We wouldn't have bodies if we didn't have a subtle body that had stuff that needs to clear to awaken us to what we already are. But that's the paradoxical journey. We already have it inside of us, but we don't know it. And there's lifetimes of karmic stuff that comes between us and knowing that to be true. And the Kundalini awakens from the base of the spine under specific circumstances. And some of them are traumatic. A traumatic experience will awaken it. The other side of that is deep, deep yearning for the divine. Many of us, myself included, I already had an awakened Kundalini that I was completely unaware of. And according to my teacher, it was stuck at the throat, which is not too bad because it starts at the base of the spine. But I also found out that that particular kind of stuckness was depleting my energy system, depleting my physical body. And I was making it worse at the time by being in a yoga teacher training, which kept pushing through the practices energies up, and they were hitting like a glass wall in my brain and then descending and causing burnout. So it's so interesting because I thought I was doing great by having a yoga practice and being in a yoga teacher training. And it was making me feel worse and worse on a subtle level. I mean, I felt good physically and I was learning things, but I was actually burning my system out. And when I started to do the other practices, there was a complete renovation of my system and a purge that lasted many years. Um, I'm going to pause there for a minute and let Sarah ask me questions because I know I'm skipping over stuff.
Or just points that you might want to clarify the difference between a non-dual awakening and a Kundalini awakening or a Kundalini process.
Yeah, I think non-dual awakening is the culmination of the Kundalini process, which you may or may not know you have. So the awakening that we do in each lifetime is carried forth and forward in our subtle body in some kind of etheric form. And at birth, at when the sperm meets the egg, not even at birth, when the sperm meets the egg, that information is downloaded somehow. Can't explain it, scientifically, but it's downloaded and encoded in the base of your spine as the dormant Kundalini. Dormant doesn't mean it hasn't already had progress in particular lifetimes. It's just reawakened to the same level in every lifetime. And then you need some help or divine grace to have it progress. So you can just be a very smart, engaged, spiritual, nature-oriented being, heart-centered being, religious-centered being, and you most likely probably have had some Kundalini awakening and not be aware of it until something jogs it and it reawakens again.
Yeah.
But non-dual awakening usually is preceded by Kundalini, a real non-dual awakening, not just a mental thought about it, but the real non-dual awakening. Kundalini would have to have risen up to the third eye and be in progress to complete the non-dual awakening at the top of the head.
Yeah, because I hear people sort of using Kundalini awakening and awakening interchangeably, and I like that you use the term Kundalini process,
Mhm.
and I like using that as well too, because yes, Kundalini becomes awakened, but it's a process leading to awakening to your true nature, non-dual awakening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And there are lots of spectacular experiences and also difficult challenges along the way. And some people mistake the initial stirrings of Kundalini or the initial release of Kundalini as the completion, because you can have an experience of God, light, everything is one, but it's not permanent yet. It becomes permanent as the whole system is purged and cleared, and non dual reality is actually established as something real, not just a thought. It's your
yeah.
experience.
Yeah, and because just briefly, for those of you who might not know, signed up for a Buddhist meditation course, and the rest is history. But then again, their Kundalini started becoming quite pronounced at the base of my spine and did a huge explosion up and out the top of my head, um, like a freight train, up and out. And but that wasn't it wasn't complete. It would take probably 4 years until it felt kind of, um, not as loud and jangly in my system, and then the following year, after there was some settling, then the non-dual awakening that's been abiding ever since took place. So, Kundalini gets you ready. Now, there were glimpses of oneness and non-duality all along the way for years, but the abiding awakening. So if you can just put in the chat, those of you who feel that you are in a Kundalini process, that would be great. And if you don't know, that's cool too. Um, and so, Dani, these spiritual practices that you were given were really specific for you and the certain type of rising that you were experiencing. And from reading your book and talking to you, it had gone up the side channels, the nadis. It didn't go
One,
straight.
once,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's known as a deflected arising. Is that correct?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's six different ways through the subtle body that Kundalini can rise. And even in my yoga teacher training, they only talked about one, right up the central column.
Yeah.
But there's six different ways, and within those six different ways, there's all sorts of variations, like where it started, where it stopped, um, the condition of the person's subtle body, the wounding you've had as a child, and also past life stuff that just comes up big time once this force has been awakened. Think of
Hmm.
it like layers and layers of an onion around your being, subtle layers of an onion, and they start to shed. And there's usually a theme through all those layers, very primal themes, behavioral themes that lead back to very deep fears, betrayals, losses, wounding. So the process is not just needing energetic support, it needs psychological and behavioral support. And it's really helpful when someone else has been through it because you think your themes are you. You think you are your story. You are your wounding. You're not. But it takes someone else to kind of have some witness objectivity to help you witness it, to let it clear. Otherwise, you get stuck at, like a hamster in a cage, repeating your stories, repeating your bad relationships. It takes a lot of inner work and courage to actually face inwards than project blame outwards. It's a very deep inward journey of clearing.
So not just spiritual practices, but therapy, healing work, all the psychological processes that we might deem not spiritual,
Right.
right? That helps the Kundalini, correct?
It helps create the right situation for the Kundalini to progress. Um,
Oh.
I just took a couple of notes that I think are really important. Number one, yearning for spiritual connection to God. That deep, deep, whatever you want to call God. I'm not attached to the G word.
Yeah.
But that spiritual outlook for me was like God or bust. There's nothing else that had any meaning to me at that point in time. So the yearning has to be very intense to encourage this force to do its job. And then you need to create a lifestyle that supports it. And for some people, that means letting go of really bad, non beneficial habits. For other people, it's psychological work, letting go of bad relationships, which are very difficult, where you're the victim, and letting go of victimhood. You know, all these things come into play because it's going to renovate your entire life, and you kind of need to put on the seatbelt and go.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think a lot of people are under the impression that a non-dual awakening will kind of, eradicate conditioning and take care of everything and therapy isn't needed. But I really appreciate that you're bringing that point forward. Yeah.
And Kundalini, because it's working through your subtle system and also your brain centers, there's a connection between the chakra systems in the brain. All the chakras are also related to places in your brain, and they communicate with each other. There's a lot of vitality, prana, vitality needed for this work to progress. And that involves like right nutrition, right rest, not being the caretaker of everybody in your life, and really focusing on yourself, which sounds selfish, but is really necessary. And also right company, some kind of dedication to sacred text or study or tradition is very helpful, not always necessary, but helpful. What else? I think just having some kind of support, because there's this grand unloading and purification process that will happen at various stages and at various intensities. And
Yeah.
then it gets subtler and subtler and subtler, and it's still going on. And when it's very subtle, sometimes it's your life itself that provokes the unloading. Like things happen in life and you're put into a situation you never expected, but it's exactly the crucible for you to change your belief system, a belief system you might not even know you had, you know. It's really interesting. So to me, it's a lifelong or lifetimes long process. And most people I encounter are having challenges. Most likely they have deflected risings, but maybe not. Maybe they're just not supporting it in the right way. But I help people with the challenges part. I don't work with Kundalini directly because she's working with you directly. It's a she, the divine feminine force. And she's intelligence herself. If you give her the right conditions, she will bring those helpers to you at the right time.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at the side notes here. There's lots.
Yeah, let's get to those in a little bit. I just wanted to ask you like how long can the process take? That's something that people ask me, for you, it was something like 14 years until it felt like it had completed. And um,
But
yeah,
I would say I'm still in Kundalini process that has achieved a degree of really great completion. And I wouldn't say I am the most enlightened person on the planet, that there's still growth. There's still growth.
and isn't that true for everybody, no matter how abidingly awake or awake one is? There's human growth on the human level. So is Kundalini still working at that time, post abiding non-dual awakening, doing
Yeah,
her thing? Yeah,
I would say so.
yeah, I would say
There's
so too.
spiritual growth.
Yeah,
Swamiji, as I called him, set the bar so high that and for me personally, until I felt like I was at his level, I wouldn't say I was done. And yeah, it's nice to have someone set a bar really high, or a saint that like Jesus, or Buddha. So until I felt the same as, I wouldn't claim to be finished. I
yeah.
still got work to do. Yeah.
Yeah, beware of teachers who claim to be finished on any level, right? You can have certain levels of realization, but the human and the development as a total being. I like how A.H. Almas refers to us as total being. The total being um, is continuing to grow. So what can people do if they feel that their Kundalini is blocked or they're having a deflected process, or because sometimes people, will say, "Oh, I think it's blocked," or it's, and not that I'm some Kundalini expert, but I do have a lot of people who come to me with,
Yeah.
Kundalini issues. And as I tune in, I can sort of see and sense like where Kundalini's bumping up in their system. It doesn't mean that anything's wrong or anything's blocked or there's a problem. It's just that's where she might be hanging out for the next year or so, So what is your experience with that as well?
I mean, for you as their guide to help them turn towards that place and look at the issues there,
Yeah,
and,
absolutely. Yeah,
and relax and do things that cultivate openness in that area, right?
yeah.
And that's what I would say myself, that I help people go towards the issues in those centers. Sometimes, though, it's really not up to the helper, it's up to Kundalini Shakti herself.
Oh yeah.
It's creating the conditions of safety. People get very afraid, and sometimes there is pain. Caitlin, I wanted to address what she asked there. So, for it's again very, very individual to the person. And there's also a certain grace that is transmitted from people who are more advanced in the process, because that just happens naturally. It's not an egoic thing. So somebody who's more open than you, there's just a transmission of grace that's helpful around people that have completed their process. But Caitlin, let me just read this.
Yeah, go for it.
Um, she recalls healing that it's painful, not that I had that exact experience, but after I gave birth to my son, I had extreme spinal pain lasting for several hours. We thought it was from the epidural, but found out it wasn't, and the doctor couldn't explain it at the ER, gave you morphine. I was on it for a week until it eventually stopped, and I never felt such extreme pain again. I'm quite sure it was probably something to do with the epidural and how it interacted with your own nervous system and subtle body, and maybe blocked something there in addition to just the pain of childbirth. And whether it's related to Kundalini or not, who knows? Um, but that epidural goes right into the base of the spine, which is the seat of the second and first chakras. And ouchies. I mean, I know it helps the pain of childbirth, and I would probably have opted for it, but it had a side effect. Um, Caitlin, where are you? There you are. Hi. Yeah. A lot of times, by the way, as a healer, when I would work on people energetically, anesthetic would come out of their body. I would smell it and they would smell it. Really
Yeah, so
interesting.
trippy.
Yeah. So, when I was doing that kind of work, after people had surgeries, it was clearing the anesthetic from the brain and the body. Very interesting because it has an effect.
Yeah. And and I've met people whose Kundalini, I have a dear friend whose Kundalini got awakened in with the birth of her child.
Yeah,
Yeah, so so it can
it
happen.
makes sense. It makes sense because the second chakra is being like exploded open by the birth of, and the first chakra by the baby.
Yeah, yeah, and she was on a Buddhist path, like deeply looking at the self and the nature of reality anyway. So, yeah, when those things come together, a really monumental experience in one's life, already studying texts or having a meditation practice. Um,
I like that question from Pamela. Yeah.
yeah, so do I. Go
Um,
for it. Yeah, what do you think about Shaktipat? Do you think it's good to
yeah,
seek someone out for it?
depends who the person is. But I have gotten Shaktipat spontaneously from being at an ashram where the teacher was dead, from the dead teacher. I've gotten it from living teachers. The only problem I have with it is there's usually no follow up. So it can, it's resonance, awakened alive Shakti in you and me. It's a resonant thing, and the energy goes out through the subtle body of the teacher, who's usually very enlivened and has strong energy field, hits your field, and it will either go wow, zooming up if you're clear, or it's going to hit your blocks, and then what? Like, do you have support for when it hits the stuff? And if there's no personal support, you're kind of left floundering unless you have a personal relationship with the teacher. Did
Yeah.
you have an experience personally with that?
Um, I have a lot of different experiences, and some of it feels, you know, energetic. I definitely haven't had some kind of, fire hose of, I would have noticed that. Um, I have feels like a lot of access just to light inside, like if I tune in, and lately a certain experience of that. Um, yeah, I think I'm looking because over the last 20 years, it's like I've had all, like these, and I think would like some way to bring them together, integrate, or something like that. So
Yeah. And have you followed any one particular path or just been searching on different ones?
yeah, so for a number of years, I was kind of on a Tibetan Buddhist path, and then the centers I was involved with sort of imploded in different ways, and I left there, and then I did some other things related to that, but mostly Buddhist, and
Yeah.
um, yeah,
The
that,
Buddhists don't usually talk about Kundalini, correctly?
No,
Correct.
no, they don't. Not on my path. You know, it was like, what's going on? Hmm.
in
Yeah.
the middle of this Buddhist path, I also did a sort of more transcendental type of meditation for a little while that focused on third eye.
Mhm.
And I found I could get very open, like very, and then things got pretty weird, and so I was like, maybe I should just be human, for a while. I kind of come back and pay my bills and do all that. And
Yeah, or get grounded again. Yeah,
yeah,
if you over focus on the third eye and the lower chakras haven't been purified, it can get troublesome. You get
yeah. So I
disconnected,
wondered if that was
too
happening.
spacey, right? Yeah.
Sorry.
You get too spacey.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I can tend to that anyways. That's
Yeah.
so good. Yeah.
What's great about the Buddhist tradition is that they work with the mind so precisely, right? So it's like clearing all the crap through the mind or through deity practices. So they're preparing the being for what ultimately will happen by itself eventually.
Mm.
But what I've heard of from some Buddhists is that their Kundalini awakens way before they're doing advanced practices, and there's nobody there to help them with it because they're not
So
working with it.
yeah, I really appreciate it. It was, very much the path of like just keep going. Like don't pay attention, don't get kind of caught up in these little experiences. And I was like, yes, I think I get that. And also, like, holy crap, like, can somebody talk to me
Yeah,
for 5 seconds about this? Like, just,
exactly.
right? Like,
Yeah, I relate to that. I mean, what's kind of coming forward is deity yoga, and I'm glad Dani brought that up. Is I did a lot of deity yoga, and which just sort of became spontaneous deity yoga, which I didn't even. If you have you done any of that?
like Vajrayana practice.
Yeah, of bringing in a deity, and they're usually above your head, and they start streaming in this beautiful light, or and then they enter your body, and you sit there as the deity. Um, it's considered guru yoga, but yeah, often these are advanced practices that you need to receive from a teacher before you can do them. But I had a kind of an unorthodox Buddhist path, and was doing them anyway. It was just something that sort of helped me. So if there is a Buddhist uh, deity, I don't know, Manjushri, Tara, Padmasambhava, someone who you feel a connection with, that you can ask for their support, and have
You
them.
just go right to the deity. Like, I don't have to take a living person as my, if I don't, because that was the
Oh
issue. I
no.
didn't want to take the person as my guru. And so, then I sort of separated from that. But I can
No,
just go right to the, like, hi.
yes, exactly. I mean, for me, it was Padmasambhava started showing up, Guru Rinpoche, like spontaneously, and I was just like, okay, I guess I'm going to hang with you for a while, and so it, you just, I don't know, you might want to explore, Tara, or whatever kind of resonates with you, and they become one with your body as you sit there, and it can be a very balancing, harmonizing kind of thing. And all they're doing is just awakening what already lives inside you anyway. It's the capacity to harmonize and balance, and to be awake.
Hmm.
You know? Yeah.
Caitlin, the pain is similar to what? There's no pain necessarily associated with Kundalini.
Well, I
I
would
mean,
like,
necessarily that some people have,
yeah,
but
because
it's not necessarily a component.
yeah, good. I'm glad that we're talking about that. Yeah, because there were some there was like a tightening at the throat or the heart or something like that for a while. I would feel it. And I work with people where like they're bumping up with like some sort of, but usually that's related to resistance, don't you find? Like
Or past life stuff, wounding. Yeah,
wounding.
that's the
Yeah.
pain, that pain, but it's not Kundalini itself. She gets a bad rap.
I know, right? It's her bumping up against your
Yeah,
wound and your block or your
exactly.
samskara.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes, yes. So
yeah.
you become aware of your pain that you've been carrying,
Yeah, which is
right?
painful, by the way.
Which is
It's not that
painful.
it's not painful.
Poor Kundalini. She's getting canceled all the time on Twitter.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I had other notes I could just say.
yeah,
What were some of the other ones?
looking at the questions here. Yeah, Inger, I mean, we can, yeah, that is, you are in a, from knowing you are in a Kundalini process, sweetie. And you know, and you're very bravely, I won't reveal too much about what's going on your path, of course, but that's why I'm always like, woo, like you're a warrior.
And I don't
You're
know
you're,
Inger
you're a
at
very,
all, but the feeling of burnout speaks to the support you need to give to yourself nutritionally. So in the first maybe 8 years, I was eating differently. I was using constantly on Ayurvedic supplements given to me by Swamiji, but there's lots of good Ayurvedic practitioners around. And for the first few years, I was putting oils on my body daily to help release toxins. And I started out very burnt out, and I would say it took 5 to 6 years to kind of feel great again. Also got hormonal support. I was in the middle of perimenopause.
Mm.
Um,
I was too with my Kundalini process.
it's
Oof.
not a good
Don't
combination.
recommend
No,
it.
don't
Two
recommend
stars.
it. Yeah, was not fun. Was not fun. But first deal with burnout by extreme self-care, really. I had massages, I had acupuncture at different times. I wasn't doing, what wasn't I doing? Yoga in yoga studios. It was too much for my system. So I was very careful about what I was doing.
And diet, what you're eating. I remember that during that time, I didn't drink, I didn't
No
have
drinking,
caffeine,
no pot, no
just
drugs.
naturally, yeah, no drugs, no mind altering. Not that I was ever really into that, but yeah, and eating as cleanly as possible. And
Home cooked meals, very important, where I would chant into my food, it blessed the food. I actually started eating chicken again and fish. I was eating fish then, but I started eating chicken because my particular system needed some animal protein. I wasn't a full vegetarian. For some people they can, some people they can't. I still don't eat red meat, but my body would like it if I did, honestly, but I don't. Yeah. And also, how do you say your name? Rigel? 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 Okay. Coming off of antidepressants and mood stabilizers, you could look into gut stabilization, the microbiome stuff. There's lots of information about that. But the antidepressants affect brain chemistry, and when you need them, you need them. Coming off, I don't know, like go to somebody, some practitioner that works with brain, good way with brain stuff. Like you can do it nutritionally, like asparagus is good for the brain. There's certain substances that are just brain foods. The medical medium talks about them. Um, and clean diet. It takes a while for the brain circuits to start to kind of get undampened, and the dampening is real. I've used something called Jarrow Neuro Optimizer for years for brain circuitry. I love it, but it's maybe not right for everybody. It has phosphatidylene, serine, and choline. It's expensive, but I searched the internet to get it wherever it's being on sale. I'm going to put
yeah,
it in there. Yeah.
great. Yeah, and even like nootropics, or, we want to be careful about that because everybody responds differently to different things. I think NAC and NAD
NAC, NAD. There's
are
lots of
really good for your
research.
brain.
Yeah, you can do some research, and some of it can be just good organic brain food foods, like
Uh,
the high nutrient green stuff.
yeah, yeah. And what do you, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What I've found is why I continue to teach Reiki through the years is I notice if somebody is in a Kundalini process, that having them attuned to Reiki and learning Reiki tends to like ground them and facilitate the process so much more. Some people say, well, stay away from energy healing in a Kundalini process. I recommend like go see someone in your area who can attune you to Reiki, become at least a level one practitioner. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know Reiki, so I have no opinion. And I usually don't do chakra healing work unless there's a specific reason on people in Kundalini process. But I do use the Tree of Life work because it's different. And it seems to support the central column opening needed for Kundalini process. And it's not harmful, it doesn't push energy through the system. So it depends on what the person is coming for.
Yeah,
But
so it's different types of energy healing. You'll have to all kind of listen to your intuition about what feels right for you about energy healers, because I saw energy healers during my Kundalini process that I felt it was helpful. But, you really have to tune in and see like what kind of practice are they using? What kind of approach are they using? And if it's too activating for you, you just have to see like, is your life getting better or worse?
yeah,
I mean, well, and also how is that measured? Some painful wounding might come up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your life has gotten worse. But
yeah. And people get very sensitive energetically to environments.
yeah,
So there have been times where I can't go amongst certain people. I never go to bars anymore. But you have to be really able to disengage from people that are draining you or have a lot of negative energy or a belief system that's just so not yours anymore. And it takes courage. Like I've lost friends and along the way. Um, it's an interesting process to discern what's right.
Yeah, yeah. It's so crazy. I was doing stand-up in bars and comedy clubs. Well, I quit actually for a few years and then got back to it once Kundalini settled a little bit more. So I think I intuitively knew to stay away from the Hollywood Improv and the Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard. But yeah, this is good. So another question I have though is that people often say, well, avoid spiritual practices
Mm.
when you're going through a Kundalini process. And what I'm hearing you say is, no, you want to continue your spiritual practices, but they just have to be the right ones for you.
Yeah, and you can kind of tell. Um, there's a difference between writing the line between being too activated and going into overwhelm. And that's true of trauma work. Most people go into overwhelm because they have an already traumatized nervous system. Excuse me a sec. But also spiritually, if your energetic system gets overwhelmed because you're a sensitive person or a neurodivergent person,
Hmm.
you have to titrate it. You have to do things slowly. So, some people can't sit still and their spiritual practice is walking meditatively in the woods or going to the beach and walking by the ocean. Um, for other people, mantra work is good. Other people, like I have a friend that can't be in group chanting environments, it overwhelms her completely. And chanting is good, right? But for her, it's too much.
Yeah.
So it's so personal. But prayer is always good. I think you can pray to guides, masters, divine beings for help, and pray for the right help to come into your life, for the right practice to come into your life. You can keep it simple. And gradually you're led from one thing to the next, has been my experience. And there's plateaus in spiritual life where it seems like nothing is happening. And that's integration time. If you don't push against that and let your whole system integrate, you kind of automatically are taken to the next practice or the next thing.
I'm so glad you bring that up because so often people they want to keep with their penetrative
Oh,
inquiry and they want to keep with the healing work and it's like let everything settle right where you are. Let whatever's been realized or you've opened to saturate you completely right now, you know?
I mean, pushing for spiritual attainment is another ego game, really. And yet, without the desire for it, nothing happens either. So it's kind of an interesting dance, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Yeah,
Oh,
the heart is so important. I think, when people are on a Hindu Vedanta kind of based path, there's a lot of devotion, and sometimes with the drier non-duality paths, or even Mahayana, Theravada Buddhism, there's the Brahma Viharas at the heart, right? The limitless qualities that we cultivate, but this sense and then there's that devotion to the guru that's talked about in Buddhism, the living guru. But yeah, what I love, what I see in people who have some sort of Hindu-based path is that there's a lot of bhakti, a lot of devotional energy that really helps them move through a Kundalini process, which is why it's so important. I'm glad you brought up the heart, to always just connect with the heart, your own tender heart, to receive, that divine love from a figure or being that you feel holds it or carries it. It could be an animal in your life, I used to look at a dog and my dog and just feel that kind of love and do this sort of metta practice with my dog, and then everything would just then the Kundalini would get really happy and so heart practices are so important. I'm glad you brought that up, Dani.
yeah. And some
Keep that in
people
mind.
experience it through music, by the way. I know
Oh
several
yeah.
people who have certain soundtracks they listen to as their meditation, and it opens their system. Sound healing really opens the system,
Sound
and
healing. Oof,
pretty
yeah.
harmless, I think, unless it's too much. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I got super woo-woo after the Kundalini activation. I was like, Buddhism, and it's very like, psychic stuff was opening up, and I was just like, yeah, whatever. I'm not going to get distracted, energetic stuff. And then that initial that Kundalini process, it really led me to get a little woo-woo. And so when I see people in these non-duality groups or whatever that are just like, no, it's all phenomena, don't pay attention to it, it's like, and it might be there for a reason to help you progress along your path, you know.
I have a very dear friend who met Swamiji after maybe 35 years of Buddhist practice. And what happened with her is really interesting because she spent very little time altogether with him. But as soon as she got her physical practice from him, she couldn't do it. And what Shakti did was move her body in the most exquisite ways. And she kept apologizing. And Swamiji recognized that Shakti was doing her practice and just watched her. Honestly, she came to him, but it was almost like to have permission. After all these years of structured Buddhist practice, it was like a dance. It was a divine dance. And that's been, she just follows her own inner dance at this point. So
Beautiful.
go figure, right? Go figure.
Yeah, I think I started doing that too. That's so interesting. It's been good to hear you talk about this, Danny, just reflecting on my own path, and hopefully it's helpful for all of you and in having some resonance here with all that she's mentioning. And movement, you mentioned movement, kind of swaying, as neurodivergent people, often we stim, right? So there's these movements that naturally want to happen, and that's because there's an excess buildup of energy in the system, right? And so neurodivergent people will stim. They'll shake their hands. You'll see people sometimes rocking or moving. I mean, as a kid, I was constantly twirling my hair. I sucked my thumb till I was like 7. I had these because there's so much energy in the system. So we're not going to get into it today, but I have a theory that neurodivergent people are, just as Danny said, she was wired for God. Um,
Mm.
I do think neurodivergent people are wired for awakening and wired for spirituality. And so there's this letting the energy move in your body. It's so important as a neurodivergent person if you feel like move. So what I hear, Danny, a lot is people are saying like, oh, I'm getting these jerky kriyas, or like, these movements will happen with the neck. And what is your advice for that? Just
Let
let
it
Shakti
happen.
move.
Yeah,
Yep.
let Shakti move. Especially if you can lie down and relax, if it's possible. Sometimes she wants you standing or sitting, but they're just Shakti moving through blocks, and it happens for a long time. Like I still get some, and it's okay. That can bring up pain. The Kriyas can sometimes be painful. What I hear is a lot of people get too much energy in their head, and there has to be a way to release that. Sometimes it's this, like you said, opening up the neck. But you'll be guided, and it can be pressure in the head for some time. It's the one thing that doesn't let up with some people until it does. Because the people I know have tried everything and it just needs to work itself through. Eventually, there'll be enough prana in the system to go through whatever blocks are there to open it. Um, Sometimes the belief is around God, that God betrayed you ages ago, ages and ages and ages ago. And that persistent belief that there is no God, that God betrayed you, that you are alone and bereft is sometimes one of the major themes for people with stuck process. They don't trust and can't surrender to anything greater. And it's a block to non-dual awakening because first, in a sense, there's a surrender, and then that non-dual awakening can actually happen. I think God is a step towards spiritual awakening when
A-
God
a-
disappears.
yeah, then when God disappears,
Yeah,
people get a little freaked out by that.
they do.
But wait, there's more. It's
There's
not the end of the story, everybody,
right.
Um, yeah, so it takes an incredible faith and trust that this process has been, the awakening process in general has been happening for thousands and thousands of years. And at one point, the guru that I work with, who is formless, who I mentioned, came forward and said, "Relax, people have been doing this for centuries." I was like, "Okay." All right. I mean, how can you argue with this incredible being? All right. Um,
Were
but
any of you, can I ask a question to the group?
yeah,
Were
yeah,
any of you here brought up very religious in any tradition? Raise
yeah,
hand.
yeah.
One, two.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, Jen. Hi.
Because at a certain point, your relationship to religion gets reevaluated too, and it's sometimes very painful, and sometimes it's wonderful. You kind of see through to the deeper meaning of your religion, or sometimes you realize that certain things in the orthodoxy of your religion are just not true. And it's also a kind of re-examining of belief systems.
Yeah, so uh I do have a question and then we're going to get to Connie. I just feel like we have to touch on this is when to see a doctor when you're having a Kundalini
Mhm.
process because I never and I'm sure you do too, Danny, never want anyone to say like, "Oh, well, it's just my Kundalini. I'll ignore that tightening in my chest for a year."
Yeah.
Like, go see the cardiologist, go get the scan, go, right?
Yeah, I just, yes, yes. And it could feel like you're having a heart attack sometimes. That's the big one. Heart process people feel like they're having heart attacks. Go see the doctor. Usually they say nothing's physically wrong with you. And
Yeah.
then you realize, but sometimes we don't know. Or if there's pressure in your head, go get your brain checked out because we don't know. I am not qualified to diagnose medical conditions, and I tell people go see the doctor.
Yeah,
And
and be
yeah.
careful of any healer or teacher who says, "Don't worry about it. It's just your Kundalini." If like get yourself checked out. And I understand that not everybody has health insurance or um, the means to, but they're stay on top as best you can with your physical health and the doctors and practitioners that you see because it is important.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And Kundalini itself doesn't protect you or bring you into perfect health necessarily.
No,
We're still frail human bodies, beings with bodies.
that's right. That's right. Connie, yes, you have your hand raised.
Definitely like so resonate with everything that's been said. I kind of came through in a Tibetan process, and it's been about 5 years, and felt like the support around that filtered out once the Kundalini was really activated. And then also, just to your other point, I was raised very devoutly Mormon.
Mm.
So Um, and completely remember as a child, they speak of it as the Holy Ghost and remember very clearly that burning in the bosom from a young child. And it's just been, in the last few years, like going, oh, we were pointing to the exact same thing here and it's not different or separated out. And yeah, so the last year probably has been really heart focused and really the resonance of the heart just really coming online. And then recently, I feel like energy is constantly moving my head like this almost anytime I sit in meditation or just sit and just tune in to the system. It's like this
Yeah.
word lift. I'm like, okay, I don't know what this is. I'll be in a room of people maybe doing a meditation practice, and I'm like this, going, this looks really strange.
Yeah.
Throat
That's,
chakra.
yeah, that's kind of what the movement is. And I think I was wanting to say, how do you know if there's a blockage? But really, it doesn't, I would say intuitively, to me, it doesn't feel like there's a blockage. It feels like there's a slow, gradual movement. because I feel a focus at one certain area, you know, for prolonged periods of time, like it's just slowly
Yeah.
moving through.
Yeah. And in a way, it doesn't matter whether you call it a blockage or an opening because they're simultaneously true.
Ah,
You should know that there are 8 subtle channels going up and 8 subtle channels going down, nadis or channels.
yeah.
And that's 16 altogether. So
Mm,
that process will go on for a while until they open, and then it will progress up here.
yeah.
It's a very important center. And, you know, psycho-spiritually related to speaking up, speaking your truth, certain amount of creativity. There's other things, the thyroid gland and your whole energy metabolism system, parathyroid, thyroid, um, nothing else. I'm sure there's more, but it's not occurring to me at the moment.
Yeah, and life will show you what you're focusing on. So
Mm,
you don't have to worry too much about like what block am I working through right now? What just look at your life. What are the themes
Yeah.
that you're working with in this moment? Or and there you go.
Mm. Yeah.
chanting and singing are great for the throat.
Right.
Also, the throat connects your heart to your brain and head. So
Ah,
Yeah.
it's always interesting to look at the brain and heart connection, like what in your brain, what your beliefs and mental thoughts are about that heart opening and how it passes through speaking your truth.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've been in a place with more solitude and in the mountains for a
Hmm.
few months now. So it does really feel like it's organically kind of just guiding a process. And so this, I think, more than anything, has just like, oh, okay, just keep trusting that the process is directing itself, you know?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah, there's such an intelligence to it and that trust and faith and I just have to say that I saw in the comments, I like Kate's comments are great here. Um that you were an atheist many years ago. So was I for many, well, probably agnostic. But anyway, I feel ya. I was like, I'll get into Buddhism. They don't believe in God. But you got into astrology uh, because you demanded God to reveal themselves, and oh boy, did they. So, like, you just like life shows you what blocks you're working on or what needs addressing that Kundalini is in sync with and also working with. You'll be shown the spiritual doorway in. Some people poo-poo like crystals and astrology, but man, just like you said, it opened up something for you completely. So,
Can I
whatever.
say ditto, ditto, ditto?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
chart showed me exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, which is being on a spiritual path. There's nothing in the chart that isn't that way. So it's an
And
affirmation.
Inger says this meeting is activating Kundalini big time.
Yeah.
So, that'll happen because there's a lot of Shakti flowing. And Dani, I know,
Between the two of us there.
yeah, there's a lot of movement. So, I'd like to just end with a grounding meditation and a reminder that, you know, be in your body, connect to your body, move your body after the meeting. If you can go out in nature and go for a walk after this, it's really helpful. It may be tempting to just sit and continue meditating, but I would recommend going on a little walk, wouldn't you, Dani,
Yes, I would say the
after this?
same thing.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to work with me, there's a free 15-minute consult just to talk a little bit more about personal stuff on my website. You just sign up for the free. You have to open a little account, but it's free. So
Yeah. And what's your website, Dani?
I'll put it in there.
It's Dani for the recording too. It's DaniAntman.com or
Mhm. Yes.
okay, it's DaniAntman.com for those of you listening after this meeting. All right. So let's just settle in, closing our eyes. and letting the energy settle. Placing a hand on your chest and one on your belly. Sending your exhales into the earth, down through your legs and into the earth, down through those roots that you planted at your tailbone, down, 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 down into the earth. Sending exhales down into the earth can really help to ground. And we thank Shakti and all the compassionate beings throughout all the realms, all the beings that have awakened centuries prior to us, that are at our back today and supporting us on so many levels. And gratitude for this gathering of noble friends, as the Buddha put it.
Mm.
May you trust in this process, and may you be well as you open your eyes. Thanks for watching and listening. And if this has been helpful to you, please subscribe. Hit the bell to be notified about whenever I put out a new video, and let me know in the comments, how are you doing? All right, till next time, take care.